This is TWiT.
ULA has a new rocket at last. They beat the Boeing Starliner to the launch pad.
Wow.
How hard is that? Yeah. So tell us all about it and what it's carrying, my friend.
Yeah. So we were looking forward to this at the end of the year. I think you and I discussed it a little bit then, but the United Launch Alliance, partnership of Boeing and Lockheed, are finally ready to launch the debut mission of their brand new Vulcan rocket. This is the rocket that will be ULA's new workhorse in this coming rest of the decade and whatnot. The Atlas V is going to be retired. The Delta family with is kind of already out the door for the most part, and so this will be like their next big thing. It's a pretty awesome vehicle that can go between medium and heavy lift pretty seamlessly with the addition of extra side rocket boosters, up to 6 strap-on solid rocket boosters. And for this flight, this debut flight, they are launching NASA's first commercial CLIPS mission, commercial lunar something, their partnership, right? To work with private companies to send payloads to the moon. And Astrobotic is going to launch their first Peregrine moon lander on this flight. And there's a lot of other payloads as well that we'll talk about.
By the way, first private lander, because Beresheet crashed. Yeah. If it's successful, it'll be the first private lander on the moon ever.
The first private lander on the moon ever to land successfully if they make it. The first U.S. moon landing, right? Since the Apollo era, right, Rod? I mean, I don't think we landed on there.
No,
after that.
Yeah.
So a lot riding on this mission. And there's some other secondary payloads too. Launch date is Monday at 2:18 Eastern in the morning. So crack it on. And if you want to tune in, if you are on the Pacific Coast, the webcast starts at, I believe that's 10:30 p.m. Pacific time, 1:30 a.m. Eastern time, and I'm hopeful that it'll go like through a spacecraft separation. We'll see how it goes, but finally, the rocket is go for launch after a lot of delays that came up in the pre-Christmas kind of time frame. It was originally slated for Christmas Eve, and then they pushed it back to January 8th. So we hope to see how everything's going to shake out. And if they make this flight, and if they don't, they have to look at the windows to reach the moon, which could dictate the next attempt. So,
and I just want to say what I don't want to hear during the countdown is anything about stuck valves.
Yes. Okay? Nothing about stuck valves.
Been
nothing.
There.
Also,
done that.
And critical, this is the first flight of the BE-4 engine built by Blue Origin, right, which ULA uses on this Vulcan rocket, and that's critical not just for this company and this rocket.
Built by Blue Origin in this rare form of co-opetition, right?
Yeah, for Blue Origin and for their new Glenn rocket, which will use these engines too.
So I do want to note there actually are a bunch of private payloads going up because they sold space on this thing. One of them is from Celestis, which is a company that sends little tiny bits of cremated remains of people that have passed on into space. And
there's two actually for Celestis on this flight. Yeah.
One of them is Mark Hopkins, the former executive director of the National Space Society, or CEO or something. I forget what his title was. And a number of famous people are going as well. And there's an interesting art project that a friend of mine, Chantel Baer, has set up with a company. I don't know how much they're talking about it, but they're setting up. What did they do? They're setting up a bunch of small sculptures and then I think selling doubles of them back here on Earth or something. Oh, nice. Anyway, it's a quite involved thing.
I'm interested in that. Let's talk about that offline.
Okay, my question for you is: we've for years heard about all these various plans, some wacky, some not, about making the Vulcan partially reusable. They were going to drop the engines out of the back and grab them with a helicopter before they hit the ocean and all that. Where does that stand?
Well, I had the opportunity to talk to ULA and to Tori Bruno back during the Space Symposium in April, and I did ask that question. That's not in the cards from the get-go for the beginning of these flights, because like the current plan would be that the engine compartment separates and then kind of paraglides back and they catch it before it reaches the ground. That's going to be like a future iteration. The next version of the rocket is what they had said at that point in time. I think there's a lot of kind of questions up in the air right now, specifically because there is some scuttlebutt, some discussion of ULA possibly being up for sale. I've seen some reports that Blue Origin is interested in that, which would make sense as well, since they've bought a lot of flights on Vulcan to launch their stuff too, or Amazon, pardon me, has. And so I think we're going to need to get the rocket off the ground first. SpaceX did not go directly into reusability. It took them several years, I think about 5 or so, to nail that first landing. And so it wouldn't surprise me if this has a few more years of shakedown for that as well.
All right. So speaking of private moon landers,
that's right.
Some human remains on this mission, I believe.
There are. There's. You mentioned some of the cremains through Celestis. Another company, Elysium Space, also has a payload of human cremains, as well as it's interesting because there's 2 different missions. There's Celestis' Enterprise mission, which is this payload on the Centaur upper stage that will eventually, after stage separation, go into a sun-synchronous orbit around the sun in deep space. And that is carrying cremains and DNA of Gene Roddenberry, Majel Barrett, many Star Trek alum, and other folks that want to go on this Voyager class mission. And so that's kind of the deepest space flight for this flight. A little more controversial in recent weeks is on the Peregrine moonlander itself that Astrobotic built. This is a commercial mission. NASA is a customer that has some payloads on it, and Astrobotic sold space to other folks like DHL and Carnegie Mellon has a small nano rover on there, and there's a Mexican payload too. But they have a payload from Celestis called a Tranquility Flight that has human cremains on it and DNA, and Elysium Space has cremains as well in these capsules that are sealed. And the Navajo Nation has filed like a protest. They're really upset that this has happened because the moon is a sacred object for them. And in the 90s, when NASA sent some human remains to space of the Comet Hunter Shoemaker, right? They had registered a protest then, and NASA said that they would always, consult with them before it happened again. And here we are, days away from launch, and they're saying, hey, no one consulted with us, so what's the deal? So they are asking for the delay of the launch. We're still waiting to find out if there is going to be a decision. Celestis has responded to say that they don't find the claims and the concerns valid. They also take issue with it being called desecration, putting these remains on the moon's surface, because they feel that they've been very reverent and taken great care to make sure that everything is sealed properly and respectfully. So I think we're going to see how this plays out, not just in the days leading up to the launch itself, but also, if the launch is successful, spacecraft is successful on its departure stage, it's something that's going to go through all the way through the landing itself to see how it goes. And it'll be interesting to see how this goes going forward, because this is the first vanguard of commercial missions to the moon's surface itself. And if successful, it sets the stage and opens the gates for all of the other commercial missions that NASA and other countries and other companies all want to do.